I'm Diana Monatic. And when I told Suzanne that I would introduce our speaker, my first thought, and I asked, how long do I have? Because I could go on. I met this addict in 1997, doing regional service. Not always the best place to meet, and start relationships. I was kind of like not real happy with our regional logo. It was our first, California Inland Region is our region. It was our first convention, and I wasn't too thrilled with the logo, and I mentioned it to him, but I didn't know at the time that it was his design. So I'm still making amends for that. Gosh, that was 1997. I was going through a real dark time in my life. My mom was passing away from cancer, and he invited me to a concert. And I said, okay, just friends, because I'm not emotionally available. And since then, we've been to many concerts. We've been to many adventures. Sometimes when he travels, he'll say, are you interested in going? And I was like, Wisconsin in February? No. He hasn't said why yet, but, and I would do that, someplace warm. But, so he does travel a lot, and I do stay home with Fiona, and I enjoy that, and it's, girl time. That's our dog. But when he said Memphis, I was like, oh, hell yeah. Yeah. I haven't been here before, and all I've done since I got here was eat, and it's been fabulous. And it is an honor and it's a privilege to introduce Mike C. from Temecula. I love you dearly. Temecula, California. We've been married, 26, 27 years? I don't know, something like that. Like I said, lots of adventures. Welcome, Mike.
I'm Mike. I'm an addict. Can you guys hear me all right? Yeah. All right. Sorry, honey. It was kind of a last minute thing, and she was like, oh, shit. It's always funny to hear her say stuff because it's like, our versions always wind up being different, and that's how things go. That's life. I mean, any of us have an experience, and our versions wind up being a little bit different, because my experience is personal to me, and I don't know about you guys, I'm just a little bit self-centered, just a smidge. So everything comes from Mike's perspective. Did I get what I wanted? Did I not get what I wanted? Did you make me feel happy? Did you make, did you have the power to fuck up my universe? Well, only if I give it to you. So thank you for introducing me, Di. And thanks for coming with me. This is the first one she's come to with me. I've been doing this about 6 years now. Like she said, it got to the point, I don't think I even invited her to this one. She just heard Memphis, and she was like, I'm going. So I'd like to thank the convention committee for their hospitality, for their service, for everybody that's given me a hug, for everybody that's here that will hug me this weekend. Let's give the committee an applause. And if I don't fuck this up too bad and you want to come up afterwards and thank me, I'll take the hug, but please grab a committee member and thank them. Thank them for their service. Volunteer to be of service with them. See if there's any help they need. Because it's being a service at a convention is a whole different way to experience a convention. And sometimes we forget, and the trusted servants start getting treated like employees, or, it's like, where's my registration? Don't you know you're fucking up my, and it's like, hey, these guys have been working all year so that we could be here this weekend and enjoy this convention. You guys having a good time so far? Yeah. All right. This is Friday night. This is Friday night at the convention, and just so I don't get the theme wrong. Love and gratitude in action. Yeah, what a great theme. I was told early on that a grateful addict won't use. And I believe today that my gratitude speaks through the love that I share with other people. And a lot of times in Narcotics Anonymous, I have a hard time connecting with, some people say, it's like, I may not know you, but I love you. And it's like, fuck, I don't love everybody in this room. I don't know you, but I accept you. And that's the love that I learned in Narcotics Anonymous, was the love of acceptance. And you know what? That was powerful. That was, and intoxicating, because I hadn't felt accepted anywhere in a long time when I came into the rooms of Narcotics Anonymous. I got here February 15th, 1992. That's my only clean date I've ever had. I've been clean for 30. Don't hurt yourself with the math. That's 33 years. And actually, that's because I've been keeping count lately. That's 12,340 days. And I'm only counting because I'm coming up on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it's like, that's a fucking awesome Facebook post. So you can't miss that shit. If I snooze on that, I do it. I like to look the next day, and it's like, damn it, I missed it. But I know from experience, like coming up on 10,000 days, about 100 days out, I started counting. And it felt like I was new, like the time was going so slow. It was like when I was counting up on, you're waiting on that 30 days, and then you're waiting on that 60 days, and it's like, it seems like it takes forever. Because I was counting and I was waiting, and it's like, so if you want to make time go really slow, start counting the days that are coming up next. Because what I've learned in Narcotics Anonymous is today's the gift. Today is the present. Hey, it's a present. It's a gift. But it's the only place I can do anything about anything in my life. It's the only place I can make a change. It's the only place that I can do better or worse. It's the only place I can connect with my higher power. It's not just in today, but in this moment, right here, right now, is I get, and that's the gift of recovery, is sometimes, not all the time, because there's plenty of time I'm up in my head, 5 minutes behind or an hour ahead. But sometimes I get to be, and I just get to be here. And I find that relates somewhat to how well I've connected with my higher power. How well I've connected with my daily maintenance. How well I've connected with other people in the program. Because I'll tell you, when I got here, I thought there was going to be like a secret edition of the basic text once I hit a year, and they were going to hook me up with a fine chick. Like there was a secret society of NA women that was going to give me like the sacrifice, the sacrificial babe that had about the same amount of time. I'm in favor of that motion. And I thought that there was going to be like some kind of advanced edition of the basic text. And I'll tell you what, newcomer, the stuff they're telling you right now is still the stuff that when I get in a bag of shit, the stuff I turn to at 33 years. When was the last meeting I was at? When was I of service? Did I help somebody else? Have I talked to my sponsor? Have I talked to my higher power? The basics. There's a reason we call it the basic text. They took all the good shit that worked and they put it in a book. And I brought mine up with me. Usually I just misquote it. I don't crack it open. And that's a personal challenge to you, to crack your book open and see if it really says what I said, because I might be fucking lying. Because they did that to me when I was new. There was this dude, Tom, that I used to hang out with when I was new. And Tom was pretty crazy, but he was a good kind of crazy. And I found out a couple of years later that he had a sponsee commit suicide the week before I came in, and he actually found him hanging in his garage. But Tom never told me that. He just latched on to me, and he loved me. And we'd go out to, coffee or dinner afterwards or before, and he'd be like, Mike, you need to cut your hair and take that earring out. You need to be a responsible, productive member of society now. And I'm like, look at all these fucking tattooed people and, all this stuff. And he was like, well, then find it in the book. And so I'd go home and I'd crack my book open and, and I'd come back, to the next meeting and I'd say, here, it says social acceptability doesn't equal recovery. I need to be like, good, and then he'd challenge me with something else. And I love that. I love that about the people in Narcotics Anonymous and the people that welcomed me into the rooms is, they used my naivety against me, and they used my fear of asking questions, and they used my ego and my self-centeredness, and they did things like, they said, you know what, Mike, if you get a bright idea, call us and run it past us, and if it's good enough, we'll both go, and I'll buy the first one. It's a trick, newcomer. Because what they were trying to do was get me on the phone. Because no matter, I would sit around like for hours, like thinking of like my really good excuse to use, and I'd call them up and I'd be like, all right, check it out. If I backed out of the driveway and I ran over my dad and then, the dog died and it's like, and they'd be like, nope, not good enough. Show up at the house, Mike, we'll go to a meeting. Because I was on the phone. I was practicing some willingness. We were talking to a guy a little bit before the meeting in hospitality, and he was asking some questions and running through some stuff, and he busted out his basic text. And there was like highlights and underlines in it, and I'm like, oh my God, this is so awesome, Because the basic text, and I've got a couple books here, so it looks impressive. It's just fucking heavy to carry around when you travel. Fuck, I forgot what I was saying. Sorry, it probably won't be the last time. The basic text. And it says in one of the introductory sections to the book, it says, this book is intended to be a textbook for all recovering addicts. What do we do with the textbook? And I know you're not going to like this, because it's like school shit. We study it. But see, when I started using... and I picked up, and I didn't know shit. I was 20, I got here when I was 22 years old. And I started really using when I was 17. And I would do some shit, and they'd be like, no, Mike, it's like, this is how you do it better. It's like, and I'm like, I'm a good addict. I'm a good student. Tell me more. Tell me how to use, tell me how to get off better. Tell me how I'm not doing it right, and I'll perfect that, and then I'll help the next guy, because I like to sound more fucking intelligent than you. And that's Narcotics Anonymous. Like I said, we took all the stuff that worked, and put it in the book. And we called it Basic, because it's a basic program. You guys told me when I got here, you know what, Mike? You can't be too dumb for this program, but you can be too smart. And I'm like, why are you telling me that? They're like, yeah, smart ass. And I got here, I was, like I said, I was 22. And so at 22, I was kind of wired to rebel, and I was wired to not take your word for it. And I made a shitload of mistakes. And what I've learned in recovery is the goal today is not perfection. It's not possible. If you're trying to be perfect today, you're setting yourself up. I'm just trying to be Mike today. And the Just for Today was about that this morning. We went to the JFT meeting this morning, and that's what it's about, is about just being me, my genuine self. Not the Mike I think that you want to hear about, not the Mike that I think you'll like. Because I spent 22 years of my life plus some. I didn't like just get a day clean and like, oh, I'm gonna like be genuine now. But I started to learn. And part of what I learned was that it was safe. It was safe to be me in here, mostly. And what I know today is that even my deepest, darkest secrets, I could come into this room and I could share about like sticking marbles up my ass in the first grade. Yeah, I did. Yeah. Woohoo! And you guys could be teasing me about that shit after the meeting. And you guys couldn't do 1/10 of the damage that I do to myself in my head with that shit. And I also believe today that the majority of the things that we have that we don't want to put down on that 4th step and share with somebody else in that 5th step, it's sexual in nature. It's that weird shit we did. For me, you know. And I've talked to enough people that, you know, they're like, hey, me too, marbles, you know. You know, because this is the original Me Too program. This is the original Me Too. You know, and people shared that shit in meetings for me. You know, they may have just alluded to it, but it was like enough that I could like go up after the meeting and they're like, oh yeah, you know, I've been there. I've been there. I've done that. Me too. I'm not alone. I'm not alone in Narcotics Anonymous. And see, for a while when I was new, and even, you know, into my first year clean, I thought, I kind of fit in here. I kind of like these people. But if they really knew me, if they really knew the things I had done, if they really knew the way I felt, I wouldn't be accepted anymore. I wouldn't be a part of anymore. And that hasn't been the case, you know. And I don't share those things too often, but every once in a while it comes up, and usually when it is, it's like I feel like that's my higher power telling me it's time, and maybe there's somebody sitting there that it's like that needs to hear that. It needs to say, oh, me too, you know, I'm not alone. I don't think that for whatever. In my experience, for whatever you've done, there's probably enough people sitting in here that there's somebody that's done it and done it weirder than you did. You know, it's Friday night. It's the convention. Are there any newcomers with 14 days or less in the room tonight? If so, please stand up. I see you there, Rhonda. We love you. All right. Woo! Welcome. Welcome to Narcotics Anonymous. You know, I know when I rolled into the rooms, it had been like I said, it had been a long time since I felt welcomed anywhere. It had been a long time since I felt that kind of acceptance that I felt in Narcotics Anonymous. And I didn't trust it at first. Because in my experience, anytime somebody gave you that kind of welcome, they want it, you know, it's like they were trying to pick your pocket with the other hand. You know, it's like I'm hugging you, you know, I'm holding my fucking wallet with the other hand. But I couldn't figure it out because it didn't seem like they wanted anything but for me to do well, for me to just stay clean another day, for me to just not use. And that was such a foreign concept for me when I was new. You know, I really felt like I'd lost my best friend. And, you know, my best friend was kicking my ass when I came to Narcotics Anonymous. I mean, I don't know anybody that got here because things were going really well. I don't know about you. You know, I was on top of the world, and then I showed up in NA, and it's like, why? I mean, if it was going great, why would we show up here? You know? I got here because I was desperate. You know, and it talks about that in our literature. Until in desperation, we sought help from each other in Narcotics Anonymous. That was the ties that bind, you know, when I got here, that was the tie that bound me to you guys, was desperation. because I was 22 and I got clean up in the desert in California, up in the high desert, and they were high. And most of the people weren't my age. They were old. They were like old. They were like 30 something. You know? I'm 55 now, so you know. But I could connect with that desperation. I could connect with what I heard, even if we hadn't used in the same places or done the same things. You know, in the area I got clean in, and it seemed like everybody was trying to one-up each other. You know, it's like, man, I did like a 8-ball, and the other guy's like, oh, I did a 16th, and the other guy's like, I just like, you know, slit my vein open and like shoved the whole fucking thing in. You know, it's like, you know, it was like they always had to have a better story than the other guy. You know, and it's like, I'm a nickel and dime dope fiend. You know. I mean, my best day was like, you know, a medium sack and nobody I had to share it with, you know, and I didn't have a whole lot of great days like that. Like I said, I really only used for 5 years, so I enrolled in the accelerated use program. So I never tried to fake moderation from the first time I used. I didn't have that stop button, you know. It's like Staples used to have that thing where they talk about the easy button, you know. I always went looking for the stop button and it wasn't there, you know. I'm like, okay, I guess I need more, because that's the kind of addict I am, you know. And that doesn't just connect to drugs. That connects to anything that changes the way I feel. That's what I've learned in Narcotics Anonymous is. There's plenty of things that don't get me loaded that can still fuck me up. That can still fuck up my frame of mind, that can still fuck up my spiritual connection. Food was my first drug. You know, I'm about 100 pounds lighter than I was a few years back. And food was my go-to for a long time. Food was my go-to from the time I was, even before I was in school. I remember it seems like the first time we had Oreos in my house, and I think we were living up in Oregon or Washington, and we had some Oreos after dinner, and man, those things were good. I liked that, but like after 3, they were like, "All right, we're done," which is like, and I'm like, "What the fuck, done? What's this shit?" Like 5 or 6 year old Mike. And so after everybody went to bed, and I don't know if I stayed up or I woke up in the middle of the night, and I got up and I cruised down to the pantry, and I was like, I'm gonna have some Oreos, And so I had some more Oreos. Oh, they were good. So I had some more, and pretty soon I'd had enough Oreos that there was like no good argument that I hadn't had like a pretty good issue of the Oreos out of the package. Well, what does a good addict do? Well, fuck it, I'm caught anyway, so I'm going to eat the rest of the package. Yeah. I might have gotten sick, I don't remember, but I remember finishing that package, And that's Addict Mike, I'm going to finish the fucking package because I'm already fucked. I'm already screwed, so why, what's the benefit in like, oh, I saved you 3. That shit's gone. And so that's how I lived, that's how by and large I lived my life before coming to Narcotics Anonymous, is, total self-centeredness. Total self-centeredness combined with that fear of missing out. I remember, and again, I'm talking about food here, but this is all, and, go ahead, get that. We can wait. No. I love doing that shit. I'm sorry. I'm just fucking with you. Maybe it's God. There used to, I remember, I grew up in the like clean your plate if you want dessert household, and I remember being real competitive with my dad. over food, over my mom's affection, over lots of things like that. And so the first person that finished got to pick the dessert, and so I'd get you could pick the biggest slab, and it's like my dad would finish and he'd get the big ass piece, and I'm like, damn it, so what was my lesson? Well, it's like, not that it was all right to have the second largest piece, it was that you got to finish first. You got to finish first so you can come up and you can get that big issue, get that fatter sack than everybody else got. And my dad and I, we had a real tumultuous relationship growing up, and he wasn't particularly physically abusive. I mean, the times he hit me, I probably had it coming. But he was verbally and mentally abusive. And I mean, I'm talking about first grade, backing me into a corner and saying, do you want to fight me? It's like, no, I don't want to fight you. I just want to take my fucking Snoopy to school, Seriously. And for a long time, I hated my dad. And I mean, I'm talking about wished he would die kind of hate. He would go off on business trips. And back then we didn't have answering machines or cell phones or any of that shit. So the phone would ring and I would fantasize about it being the airline calling to say that his plane had gone down in flames. And so into recovery, and even my first 4-step, it was all about how he had done me wrong. And there was a point, maybe about 2 years clean, maybe a little bit after that, we were big on playing volleyball in my area, and the guys I was playing with on the weekends, we needed another person on the team, and my dad really liked volleyball, and so I don't know why, but I invited him, and he came down and he played with us, and it was all right. And see, growing up, it had never been all right to expose other people that I knew to my dad, because my dad would always take my most embarrassing thing I'd ever fucking done and share it with those people when they showed up at the house. So I didn't invite friends over, because it was he was gonna humiliate me again, And so I had this experience where he didn't humiliate me, And I don't know if it was that time or a couple times after, but somebody said, Mike, your dad's a pretty good guy. He reminds me a lot of you. I was like, whoa, whoa, because that had always used to feel like an insult too. And that kind of got in my head, and I kept having him come play on the weekends, and I started to realize that my dad was just a human being, not the monster I'd built him up into my head, and yeah, he was an asshole, but he was also an asshole doing the best he could with what he had. See, my dad grew up on the streets in L.A. with a mom that, honest to God, thought she was a prophet from God, and he slept on lawns and wound, on a good day, maybe he wound up with a foster family, and he ate out of dumpsters, and he didn't have anybody to teach him how to be a dad. And when I looked back on it, not once in my life did I ever not have a roof over my head. Not once in my life did I ever go hungry, even though I didn't get all the fucking Oreos. And most of the time on a Friday night, when I asked my dad for $20 so I could go get pizza and watch a movie, with my friends, with the cool dad that would take us out, he had $20 for me. He was doing the best he could with what he had, and he provided for me. And he wasn't a perfect father, but he wasn't the monster I made him out in my head to be either. And so I learned in recovery, and I wound up calling him up and saying, you know what, I'm so sorry, I've shortchanged you all of my life. Trying to fill you into a role that, wasn't an achievable role for you, and that you're my dad, and I'm grateful that you're my dad, and I'm proud of you. And my dad passed, about 3.5 years ago, and I had almost 30 years of better relationship with my dad. Of relationship where I met my dad where he was at, instead of trying to, have him meet me in that place of expectation that he could never get to. And I'm so grateful for that. I'm so grateful for the time that I spent with my father before he passed. To where, the day that he passed, my mom had called me and said, the nursing, the care home that he was in, says, he's about to go. And my first urge wasn't to rush out there because I had unfinished business. It was to go out there and just be there for my mom. Because my business with him was already finished. I was good. And I got a call a couple of minutes into the drive out there to go be there for my mom that he had passed. And that was all right. And I've talked about 10 people in the program that day in the span of time it took me to get from where I was at on the freeway to the home where my mom was waiting and where my dad was. And I get to do that in Narcotics Anonymous. And I can't guarantee you that things will get any better with your relationships. I can guarantee you that if you keep using, they probably won't. Because using doesn't fix relationships. We were talking about the IP Another Look in the hospitality room earlier. And I love when we talk about literature. That's my home group, is the Saturday morning Leaders' Choice Literature Study. And if you don't like to read, find a literature meeting, because we'll read that shit for you. All you got to do is show up. And if you lead the meeting, you can even pick what you want, and we'll read that shit for you. I got sponsees that's like, oh, I'm on my 4th step. Well, step 4 out of the basic text. That's like, I see how it is. I love our literature. I love our literature. And it says in that IP, that using isn't a way of life. And I really thought it was. And like I said, I thought I'd lost my best friend when I got clean. I didn't know what to do clean. I didn't know what was going to happen, and that was terrifying. I would pick loaded, going to jail, sleeping in the back of a 1-bedroom Volkswagen over the unknown of this life that I knew was probably going to be fucking better. Because it was that familiar misery. I knew what to expect, and it's so terrifying. So newcomers, welcome. I know what that's like. I still remember what that's like to be in that place and not know what's going to happen and what's it going to be like and who am I going to be, and all the times I lamented about that, that like, oh, what's going to happen. I remember giving my I think I was kind of giving my sponsor shit, but on my first 3rd step, and it's like, well, what's it going to be like when I turn my will and my life over to the care of my higher power? Am I going to have to give up all my worldly possessions and move on top of a mountain, and be a monk? And he's like, do you think that's what your higher power wants for you? There's so much time in my life I've wasted thinking about shit that didn't happen. Worrying about shit that didn't happen. And it talks about it in the triangle of self-obsession, another one of our IPs, one of my favorites. And it talks about, resentment, anger, and fear being our reactions to the past, present, and future. And in fear, it relates to a fantasy in reverse. See, how's that work? Well, see, in my head, I pick the worst case scenario, and then I backtrack that whole story to how it gets back to me. And even if it's bad, it's never that bad. And so now I've made the choice to suffer twice. And see, I'd call my first sponsor Paul. And I'd, like I said, I was 22, so I would have done something dumb. And I'd call him up and I'd say, Paul, I did this and I'm afraid of what's going to happen. And he'd laugh at me. And he'd say, Mike, it's too late. It's too late to be afraid. He's like, He's like, the time to be afraid was before you did it. See, fear can be a character defect, but it can also be a healthy living skill. And it talks about that in our step working guides, that how our character defects are basically living skills gone bad, magnified to an impossible level. So fear, healthy fear, that fear of like, don't put your hand on the burner because it might be hot, which I did when I was a kid, by the way. And it was hot. Healthy fear gets magnified into incapacitating fear. And see, that's the kind of fear I lived in most of my life. If I don't try, I won't fail. If I don't go out there in the world, I won't get hurt. And I certainly won't run out of dope, because I never had enough drugs to like really make that adventure, out off the couch. And the lesson in Narcotics Anonymous again and again and again has been, it doesn't matter if I succeed. It matters if I try. Like I said, perfection's not an option. But my goal today is to go out into life and make new mistakes. Not the same mistakes, but new ones. I mean, if I ran into the wall on the left side of the building, at least hopefully tomorrow I'll be running into the wall on the right side of the building. And maybe one of these days I'll find the exit, but it'll be new mistakes. And I take comfort in that. I take comfort in the fact that perfection isn't an option. And seemed like I fessed up to early on, I have this disease that, of low self-esteem. Goes hand in hand. And so how do we compensate for low self-esteem? Well, I want to show you perfection. I want to show, I want that egomaniac with the inferiority complex, I want you to like think I have my shit together. So that you don't know how I'm dying on the inside, how I'm hurt, I'm lonely, I'm sad, I'm afraid. I don't want you to know those things about me. But see, in here, it's okay. Because I know I'm not alone. I know I'm not alone. And I know I feel those. And by being able to share about those things, by being able to express my fears and insecurities and all those things, this miraculous thing happens. I'm afraid less of the time. I'm insecure less of the time. Because I've acknowledged that. And those things die in the light of day. Our secrets die in the light of day. And it's not a guarantee that I'm never going to feel insecure or scared or lonely or any of those things again. It just means that when I feel those, I don't have to keep it to myself. I go into a meeting and I tell on myself. It says in our basic text, honesty is the antidote to our diseased thinking. I'm a narc. I came in here and I told on Mike. Fuck. Get him. He's a narc. And see, all these living skills that I learned as an addict, they don't serve me in recovery. The secretiveness, the dishonesty, all those tools that were, that was my go-to tool bag when I'm using. It's like, okay, do I lie, cheat, steal, manipulate, or a combination of, of all of these, And in recovery, that toolbox just doesn't fucking work. It doesn't make me feel good, And if you're still doing the same things and not feeling good, pro tip, if you want to feel better about yourself, do something different. If not, you're entitled to as much misery as you want. Because when the pain becomes great enough, we'll either grow or go. And sometimes, there's been times I've needed that pain. I've needed that pain to kick me out of where I was at, that rut that fear of change. It's like, but this has worked for so long. I don't want to let go of this tool. But you get in enough pain and it's like, all right, tell me something different. I'm ready. It says in the 6th step, I'm on my 6th step, and my sponsor said I could listen to it on tape. So when I drive into the office, I listen to it, and out of the basic text, it says, why would we ask something for something that we're not ready for? If I'm not ready for it, then maybe I need some more pain. And if you're not ready for it, maybe you need some more pain. And I pray it doesn't take you out. Just like I pray it doesn't take me out when I'm in that kind of pain, when I'm hanging on with that kind of resistance. So back to the triangle of self-obsession IP. No, actually not triangle of self-obsession. I'm sorry. I'm about to lie to you, so that you have to go check the literature. It's in the Just for Today IP, and it's it's talking about, and it says, we no longer seek to achieve perfection. Today we can achieve adequacy. And see, for me, with that low self-esteem, adequacy, that's like getting B's in high school. Once I got straight A's, my parents were like, well, we'll give you $100 if you get straight A's. So I got straight A's and they gave me $100. And then the next time I was like, and they're like, well, now we just expect that because we know you can do it. And I'm like, well, why am I going to do it if I'm not going to get the $100? Because I don't really care if I get straight A's. And so it was kind of like that the first time I heard that word adequacy. It's like, oh, adequate? B's? B's aren't enough. Well, I'm about 5 classes away from getting my bachelor's degree, which was one of my goals on, Thank you, ChatGPT is doing very well in all my classes. No. It's a good helper. But one of the things you often hear when you go to when you go to college is B's get degrees, C's get degrees. Depending on the degree you're going for, not all degrees. If you're going for a master's degree, I hear that C's don't get degrees. And I've been on the dean's list pretty much every chunk of time they've announced it. And it was kind of cool because my daughter went back to college and we were both on the dean's list at the same time. And I was like, hey, that's kind of cool. I'm on the dean's list, not at the same school, but with my daughter, simultaneously. And I get to do those things in Narcotics Anonymous. I get to set goals. And I spent a long time without really setting much in the way of goals in recovery. And I got to this 4th step that I was working out of the step working guides with my sponsor, and it's got this like good stuff section at the end, and it talked about values. What do I value? What's important to me? And I put some stuff down there, and putting that stuff down there meant that, okay, when that happens, then I need to fucking speak up about it. Oh God, now I'm in a position where I actually have to stand up for something I value. Ew, gross. I'm Mike the chameleon. I want to blend into the background and keep everything nice and not piss my dad off. But it's my job to speak up because I know what my values are. And then there was this list of goals, and I'm like, and I'm like, well, I'm going to fucking impress my sponsor this time. And so I took like every bucket list thing I had that I'd ever like dreamed about doing and put it on this list. And I'll tell you what, there's 2 things left on my list. And one is graduating college. And there's a part 2 to that, which means I have to, if I want to actually, I'm a graphic designer by trade, and if I want to actually teach that at a college level, which was the goal, I have to get a master's degree. And I'm not sure I'm up with all that. College kind of sucks, but But I set a goal, and it's like, and I'm gonna fucking do this at least, and then I'll reassess, because I can do that too. I can make a choice and then reassess what I want to do. And the other one is to write a book. And I got laid off about a year ago, and what did I do in between job applications? Is I did some work on my book, and it's not done, but it's a goal. But all these other things on my list, going to my 30th reunion, and I really, my ego was just like eating me up with going to my my class reunion, because I had these friends in high school that were well-to-do, and my ego always said, you're not doing good enough to you're going to feel less than when you see them, and there were other friends that had been in our class that had really thrived after they graduated, and been successful and done stuff, and so every time I would get an invite for that class reunion, it was like, oh, I can't, I don't want to do that, plus, it's like there was a point I got clean and disappeared, nobody knew what happened to me, and so I showed up to that 30th reunion, and I reconnected with some people, and people are like, yeah, we were waiting to see you on like America's Most Wanted or what, because of course I'd never told anybody I was like a nickel and dime dope fiend, it's like I had to have like the big stories, usually somebody's story I stole from jail, that it was like, I'm running drugs across the border, and and it's like, well, where's all the money, Mike? But I walked through that, and it was all right. And there were people there that, I talked about being in recovery, and I talked about some experiences with, I have a daughter that we didn't meet until she was 6. And I talked about my experiences with that, and the guy I was telling about that, after I had told him the story, he grabbed me and he pulled me over and he's like, Mike, you got to tell this to to these other guys. And I was like, what? This is just my story. Because instead of being the hero in the story, I was just the player. I was just Mike. I just showed up. I just did the next indicated step. And I remember, I struggled with my daughter because we missed out on like all that, that 1 to 6 bonding. Yeah, we missed the poopy years, but we also missed the emotional connections you form with a child. And so this 6-year-old showed up that, her mom had kind of told her some different stories about who I was. And we didn't know what to do with her, and I showed up at my men's meeting, and I've, for the majority of my recovery, I've had a regular men's meeting in my life. And for me, it's a place, I know some people believe they're special interest meetings. It's just a fucking topic meeting. We take women when they show up, we invite them to stay. Actually, I was bummed I missed Thanksgiving, because we always invite the ladies out for Thanksgiving because it's a Thursday night meeting. But I learned how to be a dad from those guys, from showing up in the men's meeting and saying, I've got this kid, what do I do? How do I be a dad? And newcomer, listen to this, because whether you got kids or not, this is one of the secrets to recovery. Because what they told me is you just show up. You just show up. If they got a dance at school, you show up. If they got a game, you show up. If they got band practice, you show up. If they want to hang out with you by the grace of God, you show up. And so that's what I did. And I thank God for my wife. My wife wasn't her biological mother. We had already gotten married, and we had made a decision we weren't going to have kids. But, men plan and God laughs. And, and my higher power had a different plan, and my wife, it was hard. It was a struggle. And there was a point, I think my daughter was about 9, and she had just gone to her first convention with us, to our regional convention out in Palm Springs. And I had been lamenting about what to do with her, because she lived up near Sacramento with her grandmother, and she's got 4 half siblings. And her grandmother was kind of making noises about how, taking care of 5 kids, is a lot. And I'd been praying for God's will. I'm like, God, what should I do? God, because really the answer I wanted was like, you're fine just like you are, Mike. Just keep paying that child support and don't do shit. That was when I was praying, that's the answer I was hoping for. And the most loudly, most clearly I've ever heard my higher power speak to me. We were at that convention, and I was praying, God, what should I do about my daughter Frances? And I heard a voice, and it's really the only time I've heard my higher power's voice. And it wasn't my voice in my head that usually sounds pretty rational. And it said, Mike, what's your dilemma? What's your dilemma? You work for yourself at home. You have a house with 3 bedrooms. Perfect timing. You have a school 300 feet down the street. You have a wife you don't have any kids with. What's your dilemma, Mike? And I said, shit. That wasn't the answer I was looking for. And I sat on that for the weekend, and we got home. And I talked to my wife, and I said, I've been praying about what to do about Frances, and I need to tell you that I need to invite her to come live with us. And if that's a deal breaker for you, that's okay. I get it. This isn't what you signed up for. And I don't know how long she thought about it, but she's still here, so. And it was rough. It was rough at first. It was rough for me. It was rough for her. It was rough for a couple doors and some pizza pans that got smashed or broken. But today, my daughter and my wife have a better relationship than I have with my daughter. And I got to do that. I got to show up. And if you want to know what the reward, because the other thing I showed up after a little while at my men's meeting and was talking about is, okay, what's so great about being a parent? It's like, it's fucking work, And they said, you get to show up. And someday you'll show up and you'll be happy that you got to show up. Same with Narcotics Anonymous, newcomers. Someday, if you keep showing up, if you jump in, if you take take every opportunity to show up. And if you show up, someday you'll get to a point where you're happy that you get to show up. And then you don't have to worry about showing up anymore because you want to be here. Because you love it, because it's home. That's my experience in Narcotics Anonymous. Jump in with both feet, newcomer. Don't fuck around. Don't stick your toe or your foot in the water because it may feel cold. It's certainly different. It's certainly different from what you know. But if you want to, I know when I started using, I didn't fuck around. I mean, they were like, Mike, you need to have like this kind of pipe and this kind of, this like kind of Brillo pad and this lighter and, clean it this. I was like, okay, fucking sign me up. Where do I get that shit? And if you want to have that kind of experience with Narcotics Anonymous, you want to have an experience where you can stay clean for 33 years, I can't tell you beyond that. But jump in with both feet. Go to all the meetings you can. When they say, hey, we're looking for somebody to help with service, raise your hand. They told me show up 30 minutes before the meeting and stay 30 minutes after, help set up and clean up. And in that process of being of service, you'll get connected with some people that are probably doing a little something for their program. And you might find that it feels a little bit good. It feels a little bit good to be of service. And be careful, because it's easy to take on too many commitments. You know? There was a point about, I don't know, it must have been about a year clean, and I was like, I had like 7 commitments, you know, because like anytime I heard there was an open commitment, I'm like, ooh, take me, you know? And I was stressed the fuck out. And I called my sponsor up, and he's like, well, Mike, if you had 7 jobs, how well do you think you'd be doing at any of them? I was like, okay, I get it. And he said, you know what, Mike, Narcotics Anonymous does not need you, but you need NA. And he said, so the lesson for you is you're going to take one service commitment. And whatever the time for that commitment is, whether it's a year, whether it's 6 months, you're going to do it for that amount of time. And you're going to do it to the best of your ability. And then when it's done, you're going to give it up. None of this like, well, I'll just hang on to this until they elect. He's like, no. You tell them that your commitment's up. You know, he said, usually you give them a couple of weeks notice that your commitment's up. And then you tell them you'll drop the stuff off at the meeting because you're no longer the GSR or the treasurer or whatever it is. And it's not your responsibility to continue to do that. And if you enable Narcotics Anonymous, see, there's in most of the meetings I've been to, there's not a mechanism in place to say, hey, you're like hanging on to this commitment too long, or you're doing too much service. You know, mostly Narcotics Anonymous, we're better at guilting you into it. We're like, never say no to an NA request. Hey, I want to go to a meeting in Vegas. Can I borrow your car? Don't say no. And so I learned. You know, I learned to practice dedication and trust that sometimes a position needs to go unfilled long enough for somebody else to hear about it and find that spiritual motivation to take the commitment. Or it didn't need to be done. Or the meeting needed to fold. There are times, because I'm not here to save Narcotics Anonymous, I'm here to save my ass. Service is an opportunity, a mechanism for me to express my gratitude for this debt that I'll never be able to repay to Narcotics Anonymous, this amazing gift that I've been given. I can never repay this debt that you guys gave me, this life that I've found in Narcotics Anonymous, the best life that I never knew that I wanted. The best life, I couldn't have vocalized this life to you when I was new, that I wanted anything like this, because I had no point of reference for it. I would have been like, you know, a nice car and a hot chick, you know, done. I got the nice car and I got the chick, so, you know. So what now? And life isn't always great. A lot of times it's as good as I let it be. Sometimes things happen and it sucks. But I'll tell you, it sucks better clean. The level of shitty life that I experienced in my using to the crap I've had to go through in recovery, there's no comparison. And I've been able to go through all of that clean. And when I've got to the stuff like my dad dying or those experiences that I haven't been through before, see, pay attention when other people are sharing. Because those people talking about their stuff that they're going through, when you wind up in a bag of shit, those are the people you can call and say, what did you do when your dad died? How did you walk through that? How are you supposed to feel? And the beautiful thing about that is once you make some of those connections, sometimes when shit goes on, some of those people will reach out to you and like say, hey, I was just checking on you. I was just checking on you to make sure you're all right. The only time I can remember somebody checking on me when I was using was actually when I got clean. And one of my bartenders tracked me down at my job and was like, Mike, we haven't seen you in a couple of months. You know, we miss you. Where are you at? Was that bartender worried about me, or did they miss, did they miss the income from my weekly bar tab? I know there's people that genuinely care about me today. You know, if you're new here, keep coming back. Tell on yourself. You don't have to do this thing perfectly. The only thing you got to do perfect to stay clean is not pick up. Well, and breathe. That's kind of important. There's a lot of things you can screw up in Narcotics Anonymous, and there are consequences for everything we do. But there's also a lot of love and a lot of latitude, and the heart is resilient. And if the only thing you do today is just not use and put your head down on the pillow, tomorrow morning you'll have another day clean. And that's pretty awesome for an addict like me, is to just have another day clean. I couldn't get a day clean when I was using. I would quit multiple times in one day. I mean, I was great at stopping. Be like, all right, I'm up. I'm not going to use today. And then somebody would call, and I'd be like, fuck, okay, not after lunch. And then I'd be like, well, that first one was good. Maybe I need one with lunch, And then, and I've quit 3 times by the end of the day, And another day, and in Narcotics Anonymous, all I had to do was say, you know what? I think I could make it today. I think I can make it today. It says in our Just for Today reading, today I'll have faith in somebody who believes in me and wants to help me in my recovery. If you don't believe in yourself, if you don't believe you can stay clean, I believe. I believe you can stay clean. I know there's other people in this room that believe you can stay clean. Call us up. Tell us your bright idea. We'll go to a meeting with you. Because using's a choice. And today, I get to make that choice not to use. I get to, and you guys gave me that freedom. Thank you.